Welcome to Bartolomeo Meo, Mugiwara fans. I'm bringing a video here about something we know just recently and only has been mentioned once in all of One Piece. But I'm going to pull from that thread as much as I can to see what comes from it. That one time in which they talk about Rox Pirates comes because of a conversation where Big Mom tells Kaido she's going to Wano to kill Luffy. She also tells him that he owes him a big favor and mentions long time ago they did get along. The Navy intercepts this conversation and is known to all of them, and it's then when Hina comments to Garp that Big Mom and Kaido are the reason he's known as the Navy hero. And he says, Rox, I'm surprised you've heard of them being so young. And they give us all the information we have of them so far, saying that before Goldie Roger, they were the ones who dominated the seas more than 40 years ago, and that even after losing their captain, they're still growing in power. The first doubt comes with the name, since you cannot distinguish R and L in Japanese writing. But in the anime, here in the original version, they pronounce it with R. By the way, the kanjis of the name in the translators result with an N in X, so it is Rox, R-O-X, and this is the way we're going to use. The only members of that crew that are clear are Big Mom, Kaido, and that captain who is no longer there because whether he died or disappeared. I don't think that he was kept in Impel Down is an option here because if so, he would have escaped after the breaking of Blackbird in level 6, and in that case, Marines would know it and wouldn't be talking like if that hadn't happened. Bearing in mind that Guard defeated them, the logical consequence for that sort of pirate would be he was executed. But I'm keeping the option he disappeared because they might want to bring him to the story later on or in a movie. Let's recall, we were told Kaido was captured 18 times and condemned to death 40 times. These are too many times so that precisely this famous capture was not one of them. If Kaido was condemned to death, his captain should be too. The thing is that once the captain was gone, for whatever reason, this pirate crew disbanded and each member took their own way. Something similar to what Rayleigh explained that happened with Goldie Rogers. That happened 40 years ago, and by then, Linlin was already Big Mom. 40 years ago, Perospero was 10 years old, and Daifuku, Oben, and Katakuri 8. And those are the elder brothers, but more of them were born in that period. Brûlé, for example, was 3. With this, the father of these first child might be one, or some, crew members. Who are those candidates? We got 3 members so far: the captain, Kaido, and Linlin. In the conversation intercepted by the Marine, we can see how Kaido still calls her Linlin. This makes me think they did really get along, and on despite of how they're talking each other lately, they will ally themselves in Wano. Because looking how things are going in this arc, where seems all samurai will be allies and the Ming in their Sulon form and the Supernova and the Straw Hats, well, if besides Orochi and Smile users have resulted to be nothing to fear, so that war that is coming looks a bit unbalanced, doesn't it? Basically, it could be summarized as everybody against Kaido and his calamities. So placing Big Mom and her crew on these sides seems to balance things a little bit. Well, about Rox, Linlin automatically brings another member with her, Strusen. We've seen how he joins her when she's a child and is alone, just after that terrible feast 63 years ago, and they're still together today. So wherever Big Mom was, we must place Strusen with her, who also has the perfect devil's fruit for this problematic hunger she has always had. Honestly, I would be surprised if he's not the father of some of these sons, at least the first, Perospero. 40 years ago, Strusen was nearly in his 30s, Linlin was 28, and Kaido something similar. Kaido being the father of some of these childs is something that fits here too. If we want to find another member for this crew, we'll need to understand how she was by then, 40 years ago, and to analyze who we know who were on it. In the Navy, We know Garp and Goku and Tsuru stood out, and Soul was also with them too at that time. There were pirate crews, but far fewer than now. The Rumbar Pirates were not one of them because they disappeared 50 years ago. So 40 years ago, Brute had been already a lonely skeleton for a decade, and he didn't recognize Big Bong when he was face to face with her. What he has done, though, is remember Goldie Roger as a rookie. This is because this was before the Great Pirate era, and goals for pirates like the One Piece or the title of King of Pirates wasn't there. So, although there were not as many pirate crews as there are now, there were several. With this, the most of the characters that were pirates 40 years ago have not belonged to Rox. For instance, White Bear. He was Edward Newgate by then, and 32 years old. We've seen a scene of him with his Nakamas and Captain where they were surprised he was not interested in treasures. He wanted a family. What we can see in that flashback is not matching with what we know about Rox. We do know that 40 years ago he was in the same boat as Bekin, Weevil's mother, who claims Wetbear's inheritance for his only biological son. So, although these events happened 40 years ago, it does not seem that we should relate them to Rox. I think if Whitebeard had also been part of them, they would have mentioned it already in that conversation with Garp. Another pirate active 40 years ago and in the Grand Line and New World, which is the area where the Rox operate, is Don Chin Yao. Garp punch that flattens his head and finish him as the drill was 30 years ago, so 10 years earlier he should be in his best moment. In the flashback of his fight with Garp, we can see Shinjao leading a fleet with a large crew, so he doesn't seem to be with the Rox either. But most likely he met them. We can mention Fher too, who we know was captain of a pirate crew who went to the Grand Line and spent some time there before returning. He was a renowned pirate and was 27 by then, so he could meet Rox Pirates as well. There is only one character of all those who we know were pirates 40 years ago that I'm convinced was part of Rox: Shaki. This is not a great revelation because it's quite clear. Even there is a question for Ora about it in a SBS, and he answers something like, I don't know, I don't know. It's not just that she mentioned she was chased by Garp, which could be true for anyone with a bounty. No, what really makes me think she was with Rox is she's playing she quit piracy 40 years ago, precisely when Rox dispersed. There seems to be a lot more to tell about this character. I bet she's even Devil Fruit user, because she was introduced with this image after beating a pirate bigger than her, and she has no signs of struggle or fatigue. Besides, it's shocking she hasn't changed a bit physically from this flashback 22 years ago. And she does not look like Bane 64, as the Vibra card says she has. If I had to bet for something, I would do it for a song, as she's always wearing something with an animal on it. We haven't seen one for an insect, but looking at this image, a mantis is coming to my mind. But it could be some type of lizard with regeneration too, that would explain she's not changing in decades. As the purpose of this video is not mentioning every old character in One Piece who was there 40 years ago, we'll ignore the most of them, whom we could assume were never related with Rox. Special mention to Dr. Kureha, who is 141 years old and for whom all the past we know is in the Kingdom of Drum. But who knows where she was 40 years ago? And besides, she knows about the Wheel of D, which could point to experiences somewhere else. Or Lao Ji, who still wasn't part of the Flamingo family, but he was born in the North Blue and joined Don Flamingo in that same sea, so we can presume he never left that sea before. So I leave for the end the ones who were more likely to interact with the Rox, since they were fully active 40 years ago by the Grand Line. The Gorosei. At least they talk about them sometimes, and there is a chance that even Im-sama took some decisions about them, since they were the biggest problem for the world government by then. Or Oars Jr., who was also in the New World, although it doesn't seem that he can tell us something now. He has similar features as Kaido, and this might suggest they could be related somehow. His crew, the Little Pirates, who appeared at the Paramount War in Marineford with him, didn't look so old as to have been with him 40 years ago. We don't know either where his relationship with White Bear came from, but we can assume it was later than the Rox era, as White Bear was no captain by then. I'm not saying he was part of the Rox, because I don't think so, but he could meet them and have some stories with them, or at least with Kado. I can mention the Giants here, like in general, who can live for centuries and for whom 40 years is not that much. For example, the young giantess in Harjudin's crew, which is now part of Straha's fleet, was Linlin's friend when they were both in Elbaf, more than 60 years ago. It's difficult to think that a giant could be a big mom's Manakama, though, after the mess she left in Elbaf and the content she earned there. At least a giant in good terms with that country. But there is a particular one that, in my opinion, is the only one could be with Rox. San Juan Wolf. This pirate was in Impel Down for many years until being freed by Black Bear. We've been told his crimes were so terrible that were removed from history, so it's logic to think he could be repudiated by Elbaf. 40 years ago he was 59, and we don't know when he was imprisoned, but we can deduce that it was around that time. And the final character I'm going to mention I think can be a big surprise for some of you, as it is a supernova. Jigurir Bonnie. We know she had an issue with the world government years ago, and here we're dealing with a theory on a theory, because it's me. I believe Bonnie was active 40 years ago. Although I also think her activities did not take place at sea, so although she can have her own information about rocks, doesn't seem she was part of them. But we must consider the skills of this character for changing how she looks like, as was shown in one of her appearances, in which she steals a piece of pizza and immediately goes unnoticed by transforming into a girl. I'm trying to tell with this that she could be an old character looking very different now. We'll talk about her in another theory. Well, we could finally get quite a amount of data from such a few information. I hope you've liked this analysis, and if so, we might meet in another video. See ya!